Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Tonight we'll be covering the Analects, Book 3, chapters 19, 20, and 21. We'll get started with those three particular chapters. Go ahead and type exclamation point in the chat if you'd like to read your version of the Analects for Book 3, chapters 19, 20, and 21. James, thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, okay. I have the James Leahy translation, which is the one at ctext.com. I think that's what it is. ctext.org, sorry. Okay. Number 19. The Duke Ding asked how a prince should employ his ministers and how ministers should serve their prince. Confucius replied, "A prince should employ his ministers according to the rules of propriety. Ministers should serve their prince with faithfulness." Number 20. The master said, "The Guanju is expressive of enjoyment without being licentious, and of grief without being hurtfully excessive." Number 21. The Duke Ai asked Zai Wo about the altars of the spirits of the land. Zai Wo replied, "The Xia sovereign planted the pine tree about them. The men of the Yin planted the cypress, and the men of the Zhu planted the chestnut tree," meaning thereby to cause the people to be in awe. When the master heard it, he said, "Things that are done, it is needless to speak about. Things that have had their course, it is needless to remonstrate about. Things that are past, it is needless to blame."
Thank you so much, James. Would anybody else like to read?
I can read.
Oh, that'd be great. That would be great. Thank you, Suki.
Okay.
Do you have one or two versions that you
I
would
have
like to
two.
read? Oh, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
19. Duke Ding asked, how should a ruler treat his ministers, and how should the ministers serve their ruler? Confucius replied, the ruler should treat his ministers in accordance with the rights. The ministers should serve their ruler by doing their best. 20. The master said, in the Guangzhou poem, there is joy, but no immodest thoughts, sorrow, but no self-injury. 21. Duke Ai asked Zai Wo about the altar to the god of the soil. Zai Wo replied, the Xia used pine, the Shang used cypress, the Zhou used chestnut, in order, they say, to make the people tremble. When the master heard about this, he said, don't try to explain what is already done. Don't attempt to remonstrate about what is finished. Don't decry what is already past. Okay, another version.
Thank you. No, I was just going to say thank you for that.
Sure. The other version is, Duke Ding asked, how should a lord employ his ministers, and how should ministers serve their lord? Confucius replied, a lord should employ his ministers with ritual priority, and the ministers should serve their lord with wholehearted devotion. 20. The master said, the chirping of the osprey is expressive of joy without being I cannot pronounce Licentious. How do you pronounce that? License.
That's it.
Licentious.
Oh, licentious.
Licentious.
Licentious. And of grief, I, without being hurtfully excessive. 21. Duke I asked Jaiwo about the altar to the god of the land. Jaiwo replied, the Xia sovereign used pine, the Yin people used cypress, and the Zhou people used chestnut. It is said to instill a sense of fear in the people. When the master heard it, he said, do not discuss what has been done. Do not dispute what is irrevocable. Do not censure what is already in the past. Censure, censure. Okay, thank you for the help.
Oh, no, thank you. I really like the first translation. It's very clear.
And
I've
your
actually-
English is infinitely better than my Chinese.
Thank you.
Thank you, Suki. So, Jason, would you like to go ahead and just share your translation before we do takeaways? Or do you want to do takeaways first? Okay, we'll go. We'll share.
Do we do new takeaway? Probably we do takeaway first, then because I find out the translation, most of them are similar, right? Just
Right.
the tone is different. So let's get what we, what we get first. Then I can have my own translation and explanation. Because this one is, how do I say that? Because it's a little bit different, because I think that I don't want to lead everybody to certain direction. That's I try to do.
Sure. No, so that sounds great. So go ahead and type exclamation point in the chat to share your perspectives on verses 19, 20, and 21. Mon, do you have any initial comments, or would you like to wait for Jason's translation?
I can wait for the translation because I'm pretty vested there, but I am eager to actually hear others' thoughts and return to this idea of the significance of ritual.
Great. Yeah, I think that's going to be an important thing, that some of the things that James and yourself had mentioned prior to our recording. So folks, go ahead and type exclamation point in the chat to share what you have taken away from these 3 verses in book 3. James, thank you.
I only want to share in that sentiment. I am so anxious to hear Jason's translations that I don't want to delay any comments. I don't understand, why we should separate the experience of the other translations from the experience of Jason's live translation, where he actually shares the history and the meaning of some of the symbols and concepts. It's invaluable, but I think we should all get we should get as much information as possible, and then make comments.
And
Okay.
not to interrupt James, but I want to thank you for an abject example of the power of ritual. This is how we have done it, and it has worked, and we want to stick with that.
I agree. So thank you. So, all right, Jason. I know Jason was kind of had tried a new way, but it looks like everybody is in favor of remaining true to the ritual.
Okay, so let's do 19. Okay, Duke Ding of Lu. Okay, so Ding is the Confucius home state, Lu. So his name is Ding. Okay, so Ding is the father of I. Okay, so Ding, Confucius' short employment is under Ding. Okay, the Duke Ding's reign. So that's when I believe this one probably during his employment. Okay, so Duke Ding of Lu asked, how does a prince direct his minister and a minister serve his prince? So big question is why the prince or the ruler of Lu asked this question. Remember, during that time, the powerful house, there's a three house, right? The Ji, the Meng, and the Shu, three houses. Confucius has been complaining about this situation. So the ruler asked this question because the minister are not listen to him because they are so powerful. That's why he has given as how the prince direct his minister. How does a minister serve his prince? Because that's his urgent problem. So Confucius' answer is interesting. And a little bit notice here. Usually we will see, he said, the analect will say, the master said. If you pay attention, okay, here it doesn't say the master said. He said Confucius replied. Okay, remember the ruler, the lord, is his boss, Confucius' boss. So Confucius doesn't speak as a master. He speaks as a teacher. So the real words in Chinese is Mr. Kong reply. So remember, he replied his question. He is not saying or teaching. So Confucius replied. Okay, so his reply is interesting. He said, the prince, if the prince directs his mistress with Li, which is richer, then the ministers will serve him with loyalty. Okay, so basically he's addressing the problem because you lost the richer, the Li. That's why your minister are not serve you full-hearted. Okay, so according to I think Suki's translation is very good. The last word, 忠. In general, we translate as loyalty or faithful. Okay, but faithful probably a little bit too religious. Loyalty probably too patriotism. Okay, but this word in Analect has two meanings. One is loyal to your superior, okay, to your boss. Second meaning is full-hearted, do your best. So basically, that means the loyalty has two meanings. I think Chinese 忠 has wider, broader meaning than English. Other than loyalty, they also means you do something full-hearted. So, so that's the meaning. So this one is how Confucius tell his boss, Duke Ding of Lu, okay, how the relationship between the prince and his minister. Chapter 20. The master said, the book of oath is an expression of enjoyment without indulgence, grief without distress. So here, Confucius say, 官居, okay. So 官居 is the first two words of first two words of the book of oaths. The first song, the first two words of the first song of the 305 songs. Okay, so here usually there's a two interpretation. One means this point, okay, this point, okay, or it could mean the entire book. It's very possible Confucius used this first two words to imply the entire work. So we don't know. Okay, but I kind of feel Confucius is talking about the entire book because this book, a lot of things it talk about your enjoyment and the sadness, but with the control of Rachel, the D, when you be happy, enjoy. You don't go over the boundary, right? And without indulgence, okay? And for example, drinking, okay? So Confucius doesn't say don't drink, right? After you compete with your friend as a 君子, finish, you descend and drink, but you don't drink too much. So within control. When your parents die, you were sad, but you don't just like crying all day long and then you feel so sad that you're not going to work. So basically, talking about 3 years. Okay, so everything in control. That's Confucius. So Confucius will look at this book of oaths as expression your sadness and without distress, or enjoy your happiness. Just I think last week we talked about the song talk about the beautiful ladies. Okay, but you just praise her beautifulness, but you don't go over. Okay, become indulgence. Okay, so in today's point of view, you just watch, praise the beautiful lady, beautiful man, but you don't go over to do something wrong. So I think that's Confucius' point about the Book of Oath. 21, again, this one probably a little bit difficult. Okay, so Duke I of Du, okay, Duke I is much younger than Confucius. That's after Duke Ding died, and his son, Duke I, okay. And his name is I in the Chinese means morning. So usually, I think I mentioned this one, usually Chinese give the posthumous name, okay, after the emperor or the lord died. So use one word to describe, to conclude his life. So he got the name as I, which means mourning or sadness. Okay, so that means he's not a good one. Okay, but basically he died. I think they had the revoke, and then he tried to use foreign military to help him, and then turned out he failed. He has to escape and then die outside the country. So that's his life. So he's much younger. Okay, so during that time, Zai Wo, okay, called Zai Wo, is Confucius' another student, and you will face this student later. He's kind of rebellious student. Seems Confucius doesn't like him much. So every word Confucius to him, it's not a good word because he's rebellious. And his famous sin is he's sleeping during the daytime. Okay, so Confucius criticized him. So we will see that later. So that's the backside story. So Duke I of Du asked Zai Wo, because Zai Wo is working for the one of the family, I think, about the temple of spirit of the dead. Okay, so this one called Shi. Okay, Shi, this word. Remember, we talked about the grand temple. Grand temple is to worship the ancestor of the Zhou, the emperor. Okay, and the Shi is the kind of like the spirit of the land. So more on the secular, a temple, small one. Okay, but each state, each county, they should have something called Shi. Okay, and the tradition is you grow tree next to the temple. So Duke I asked Zai Wo, okay, the tradition, okay, the three dynasty before Confucius' time, right? So Xia, Yin, and Zhou, okay, that's the three dynasty before Zhou. So Confucius, Zai Wo, okay, replied to Duke I. He said, the people of Xia dynasty planted pine trees next to the temple. The people of Yin planted a cypress tree next to the temple. So the pine tree and the cypress tree they represent the long-lasting and the endurance because they are evergreen during the winter time, still green. So they represent the long-lasting. And he continued. However, the people of Zhou, that's Confucius time. Okay, people of Zhou planted chestnut tree. Chestnut tree in Chinese pronounced as Li. Okay, and that's the same pronunciation as trembling. So he said, Zai Wo said, the people of Zhou planted the chestnut tree, which is Li. Okay, because when the name, the pronunciation of chestnut tree, which is Li, make people tremble with emotion. So Zai Wo's meaning is the situation has been changed, right? Before people think about long-lasting, the government think about long-lasting, think about future. But right now, people start the government start to think about how to make people scared, trembling. All right. So look, guys, everything is degenerated. Confucius knows this. He has his famous word. He said, when the master heard of this, he said, it's needless to talk about what has been completed. It's needless to criticize what has been decided. It's needless to blame what has been passed. So that represents Confucius' attitude. I don't know how do you think about it. My personal feel is a little bit, you can call it a wisdom, okay? And then you also can think about it's kind of a little bit too passive, okay? Because the things already complete, you should not talk about this. And then somebody, I think he's talking about things already being decided by your boss. You don't criticize. And then something already passed. It's no use.
Oh, I think Jason
I was about
froze.
to say, is that me or is that
Thank you.
Jason? There we
Oh,
go.
there you go.
All right, thank you. Or thank goodness, I should say. Thank you, Jason, for that translation. Now, if anybody has any comments on any of these three verses or chapters, I should say, go ahead and we'll start with Aman, and then we'll come to Jason, Dave, and then followed by, is it Jang? Am I saying that?
So,
Okay, I'm sorry, Aman.
oh no, that's fine. I am currently wrapped into a couple of hiring committees at my college, and working with them, working with HR, and then reading this, it occurs to me that in a modern setting, Confucius would have reveled in the opportunity to work in a human resources department writing job descriptions, because these three chapters really kind of get at this idea of one of Confucius' core ideas. Each person has a role to play and they should play it correctly. That opener 319, where he asked, when Duke Ding asked, how does a prince direct ministers? How do ministers serve their prince? It's asking for a job description. And it strikes me as Jason saying that they weren't listening to him. They had gotten too big for their britches. And it's sort of when the chain of authority breaks down, or God forbid you get a supervisor who only wants to be your friend and doesn't want to actually supervise, then act shocked when all of their subordinates are running amok. And I think that's Confucius's sentiment here, is that the prince directs the ministers with li, with ritual of sorts, with the expected behaviors, and then you'll get loyalty from them. Know your job description and do that job. and then you can expect from them what you should expect from them. Try to rewrite the rules on the fly, or get too buddy or, you know, take authority you don't have, is a recipe for disaster. Again, the Book of Odes or the Song of Waterbirds is kind of the recipe for, you know, doing very emotional things in the very best means or measured way, doing it enough that it gets out your enjoyment without becoming licentious or indulgent, getting out your grief without it becoming, you know, ennui or just complete distress. And that last one, 321, I think the players in this passage are very important. Duke I, who is, as Jason said, the young Duke of Lu, of the state of Lu, is asking Confucius's student, Zaiwo, who, as Jason said, will meet the slings and arrows of Confucius' contempt more often than anyone else in the Analects. This is kind of that, the new supervisor comes in and says, so how are things done around here? And they grab the most eager but least qualified to answer the questions. And Zaiwa goes ahead and answers the Duke's questions, you know, in a manner that sort of shows off, hey, look at all the knowledge I've stored. Look at all these ideas that I've been able to hold on to and can regurgitate, you know, when these were planted, what types of trees they were, what the meaning was for each of those. And when the master hears of it, of what Zaiwa has done, he basically is just shaking his head saying, needless, 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 needless. You don't have to talk about what was. You don't have to impress them with, you don't have to create an argument with something that's already been done, not on your watch, just to show how much smarter you are than you would do it better. Better to, you know, actually start learning here and now and be thoughtful of the people here and now, which is unusual. It kind of rubs against Confucius' reverence for those of bygone times, but I think it's in the case that Zaiwa is doing it not to honor those people, but to set up a straw man in the Zhou dynasty of, you see how bad these guys are at this. You see how they didn't get it. See, I get it, so I'm going to serve you well. And he's saying, you're arguing with something that was already decided, already done. That's not proof that you're going to get it. Yeah, so those were just kind of my thoughts on these three, but I do think they get right to the heart of this idea of ritual performance, ritual behavior, staying in your lane and knowing your role and performing it correctly, not in a showy manner.
Thank you for those great comments, Aman, as always. I mean, it's fantastic. And I want to get to everybody in the queue, but I think that this, you know, a couple of points that you to build on. I mean, the importance of humility is important in passage 21, but I want to come back to this idea of role ethics, because I think that this is kind of critical throughout the entire Analects, is that we're continually talking about roles, whether it be your role as a son or your role as a parent, and the role of ritual, and the importance of playing your role well, whether it be as an employee or as a leader. So we'll come back to that a little bit, but I want to get to, we have a lot of people in the queue. So I have James, followed by Dave, and then I think, I'm sorry, actually, I think, and then Jang. Is it Jang? I hope I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you. You'll be next after Dave.
I'll be glad to wait until later. You could put me at the end if you want, because I didn't actually put up my thing yet. I noticed Dave, mine was up twice because I talked twice already, and
Okay.
Dave is yeah. So I'll put mine up now, and you can call me at the end.
Sure, absolutely. Dave, you get to be the
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I'm trying to get caught up. I've got a translation by Burton Watson, picked it up at the library. And yeah, when I put my note in, I was wanting to mention a pun, and it turned out Jason pointed it out, but it turns out I've got another book with additional information like I did in the Tao. But yeah, in 21, at the end, that chestnut is Lee and tremble is Lee, and Jason did point that out. And what little know about Chinese, I think each word can be pronounced 6 different ways. So that's why they're different meanings. But I also wanted to question Jason, because I think in 19, the ritual was also the word Li. So is that stretching things too far, or is that at all related?
No, it's the same pronunciation but different writing. So that's a difficult part because the Chinese same pronunciation that some of them have 100 of different meaning. For example, people say, "Can I have Bing?" Okay, that's a famous conversation. The foreigner go to Taiwan or China, I'd like to have Bing. Okay, it could be Bing means biscuit, Bing means ice, or Bing means I got sick. Okay, there's many of that. Bing also means soldier. Okay, so there's many meaning on that with the same pronunciation, even with the right tone, also have many meaning. So that's the difficult part.
Thank you for that, Jason. Does that answer your question, Dave? Or is that all?
Yeah, just a chestnut and tremble were the same word, Lee.
That's a different word in today's language, but in today's writing, but during that time, probably they use the same word. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Jang.
I have some questions about Jason's translation, actually. Jason, do you mind put up your translation again? I mean, share screen.
Yeah, no problem. Let me show you. Okay, can you see it? Which one?
Yeah, the first one, 319.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the last sentence there.
This one?
Yeah, addition to
loyalty?
translation. I don't think there's if the prince directed his ministers would, then the ministers would do something. This two sentences should be like parallel. The princes they should do this, and the ministers they should do that. So I don't think in the original text there has this kind of logic like in your translation. So I'm not quite sure where that is come from.
Okay, yeah, I got you. I got your point, because during that time, the if then this kind of logical probably not developed. So you are 100% correct. In the text, there's no if then. So another way to read it is if you look at the text itself, would be the prince should direct the minister with the, and the minister should serve the prince with loyalty, right? That would be the right way. But I kind of put it in the historical background because Confucius' reason answer this question, because the prince asked him this question. He is replying. So I add if on that. The reason is that Confucius properly answered his question instead of just teaching. Yeah, I thank you. You mentioned this one. I thought of this one, whether or not I have to put if on that. And my decision is put if on that because even the text is not there because Confucius' tone should be answering Duke Ding's question. That's my take. Yeah. So
what I'm thinking is if we translate it, it should be like loyal to the original text. And then you can have your own interpretation to it. That's two different things. That's what I'm thinking. And also the 321, I think there's some like meaning shift because
21. Okay, let me show you the 21.
yeah, 321. From the original text, I don't see, I don't know where the plant, this plant Cyrus, plant this and that, where is that from? I think what they're saying is that spiritual tablets they used Paris to build that spiritual tablet and used different type of woods to do that. That's the original text.
I got your point.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that plant those trees. Where's that from?
No, there's no say print the tree. I just assume. Okay, when they talk about tree, so in your explanation, you talk about the tablet is made with different tree, with the pine tree.
I think that's what the original text is talking about.
Well, I think that could be right, because what I read or what I learned is because the tree always planted next to the okay, which is the small temple of the land. So I will assume, instead of assume, it means using, because the text only said using pine tree, using cypress, using the chestnut. So I'm not sure, when the text say using something, or it means to print it that or use that one for something, right? So that's the probably two different ways to think about it.
Yeah, okay, but again, as I said, I think if we translate, we should just be loyal to the original text, and then we can have our own interpretation of it. That's two different things.
Yeah, I agree with you. And then the people here who know me, I think I've been very faithful.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
I've been very faithful. With other translation, English translation, they probably add like 10 times more than what I'm adding.
Yeah.
It's always a struggle because if I'm too faithful to that one, probably become a little bit meaningless to a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we can have the interpretation part after the translation. That's why I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Jason has been very, as he mentioned, and we actually experienced this a lot during the Tao. We would read several different translations, but Jason would actually bring us back to what is actually the purest form of the translation, and then we would actually engage with it. But yeah, no, I think Jason's been a literalist very all the way through here. So and staying very true to the text. So thank you, Jay. Aman, I see you have your hand up. Do you want to comment really quickly based on what's been said? And then I have a question for both you and Jason.
I wanted to address what Jane is talking about because I understand the critique and the concern. I just actually was having this discussion yesterday morning, in fact, that there is no such thing as translation without interpretation. It is an impossibility because no two languages perfectly correlate to one another. In order to gain the meaning of an original language into another language requires some re-engineering. a absolutely pure word for word translation from especially ancient Chinese or classic Chinese text into English is unintelligible. It is a virtual meaningless sort of collection of words to the average reader. And even to many scholastic readers, it would be very cryptic and very hard to understand. Trying to strike the balance of getting enough, being faithful enough to the original, yet making what you put out there intelligible. It's a balancing act. It's never a perfect balancing act, but it is a balancing act. What I appreciate both of Jason and of good translators in general is that the reason or logic behind the choices made can be evident in how they decide to translate. And we ran into this with the Tao Te Ching a lot, where we saw what were only loosely able to be called translations, very much just interpretations, and others that tried to be much more literalist or much more textual in their translations. But ultimately, no matter how well somebody understands both languages, there will always be some variation in that process.
Yeah, thank you for that, Aman. I have James and Kevin, but James, do you mind if I ask a quick question
Sure.
before you go? Just really quickly, because I don't want to lose the thought. Does Confucius make a distinction between, and when I'm talking about role ethics, Confucianism, does it make a distinction between the circumstances that you're born into, so say your family, and the other, or the role that you play in society? Because I know in Stoicism the distinction is they do make a distinction between those two. But I guess in either case, I'm getting the impression from what I've read about Confucius is that you're supposed to play this role well. I mean, this is something that no matter what. But is there any distinction that's made there?
Were you directing that question to me, Joseph?
Actually, to Amon or Jason, if possible. Although, if you want to comment on it, go right ahead, James.
No, that's quite all right. I'll wait for
I'll
Jason.
say very briefly that I do think it's interesting you bring up the idea of role ethics. The nearest parallel in modern sort of philosophical ethical circles I see to this is an ethics of care, which is sometimes espoused as a feminine ethic or a feminist ethic, but it takes seriously the idea of knowing your position relationally to another person and what your duty is based on that. I think that and Confucianism have more in common than Aristotelian sort of Nicomachean ethics.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted that clarification. That helps me a lot.
So,
do you have anything? Yeah, go ahead.
Joe, you asked me the question, or you said James?
Whatever, anybody.
No, I think he was trying to say your name, Jason, but in my eardrum, it just like sounded like, oh, that's me.
Did I say James? Forgive me if I did. I meant Jason. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
So
yeah, I think that's my view. I view Confucius is very focused on your role play. Okay, so in a way, we consider him as conservative. So if you are son, role of son. If you are father, play role of father. So I think that's his fundamental. He never talk about it because he assumed that's a given.
So thank you. So James, now feel free to.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I just have general comments about the items. I find that 19 to me, I kind of want to strip it of the commentary a little bit. It does seem to me that there's this appropriate this kind of like appropriate action of the prince. How does the prince treat or otherwise employ his ministers, and vice versa? How do they serve their prince? And the answer is it's the prince's it's the ruler's responsibility to make the ministers courteous. He can't assume that how they're he can't assume their perfect behavior. And as for the ministers, they have to behave very well. They have to behave well, and they have to be loyal to the prince. So I think there's this kind of like reciprocal action idea in number 19. Number 20, the key thing I see in number 20 with licentiousness and excessive grief idea, I kind of see it kind of like, well, you have to be moderate. Things
Yes.
in ritual and life have to be moderated. You can't be inappropriately licentious in your lifestyle. And then with number 21, the immediate thing that comes to mind, and I'm kind of stripping it of this legend of Zaiwo, because I have to be skeptical about that, because I haven't seen all the evidence of Zaiwo's idiocy. But here I see this idea that he is an opinion maker, and the opinion doesn't sound wrong. It only sounds historical. And it's quite and I guess the language is difficult there. And then at the end, don't talk about what happened, don't remonstrate when it does happen, and don't blame the past for things. And of course that's fantastic, right? Because that means what's done is done. Don't try to but on the other hand, it does sound incongruous slightly, because the language of the answer to the question on in my translation, it's the altars of the spirit. I forget what you called it, Jason. But the language is that he's being asked, what has been done about the altars of the spirits of our land, Zaiwo? And he answers back, the sovereign of Jia planted a pine tree. The men of Yin, not the sovereign, the men planted the cypress. That might not be the actual translation. And the men of Zhu, other men, planted a chestnut tree, which is good for another reason. All this virtue, in planting trees. And then the master replies, well, don't talk about the past. It sounds a little incongruous to me. On the other hand, the point about not talking about what happened, it's not necessarily wrong to talk about history. So it's even if the principle of what's done is done, and don't remonstrate about the past is a good idea, because I follow that. I don't remonstrate about the past, but you do talk about history, and it's good to remember the ancients and so forth. So I don't quite get the wisdom of number 20. There's an incongruous element, and there's kind of like this kind of like intentional, well, maybe he meant something very good about this. Maybe this was just the concept of what's done is done, don't regret. Thank you.
I mean, it's interesting, because I thought the same thing until actually Aman had given me some context. I don't know if it was me that was actually going in or out there, but I think James, you might have been going in and out. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, so I think I also have the same concern about it. I think it's James, you're talking about 21, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
I think Armand give a very good comment on that, which I never thought about that because this word is specifically to 宰我. Okay, so I think that's very important and totally makes sense to me because Confucius' words is always pointed to his student, especially when students show up. So I think I at this moment I totally agree with Armand because 宰我 is showing off. He know a lot of what's the tradition. He kind of showing off. So Confucius say, oh, that's already passed. We don't have to talk about this, right? So, back to your work, okay, something like this. So I think that probably makes sense in this way.
I wanted to point out real quick that also I think there's a tell in that just one passage prior to this, Confucius is pointing to the Book of Odes, which is as far past as past can be. It's a reverence he shows to those who came before and what they've done. And the difference between his admiration of those people and Zaiwa's denigration almost of the Zhou dynasty for doing this for something as silly as a pun, it is what's in contrast there. Zaiwa is saying, the Xia did this for a good reason, the Sheng did this for a good reason. The Zhou have done this just half-assed. And, here's the evidence of that. And Confucius is saying, don't speak ill of your forebears. Don't knock it until you've had to make the decision.
Right. I mean, that's an excellent comment. And again, I had the same question until Aman actually really gave me some context for this particular passage as well. One thing I will say is I also liked with number 19, what I really liked is Suki's first translation, where there was the distinction of honoring the rights of an individual and the individuals that the rights, the master would honor the rights, and that the servants would actually do their best to serve the role, that whatever role that they were playing. And I thought that was actually a good way of actually capturing the relationship between the master and the servant. So we'll actually go to, I think, Kevin and Suki next. Great comments, James. Also about temperance. I really appreciated that. Okay, Kevin.
Can you hear me? Oh.
Yes, now we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, for me as a general, this inspired me when we read traditional Chinese texts. Try use big level yin and yang, and it's inextricable. It's together. They always use comparative learning. From if you use the I don't know who's one slogan, Western, not left, not right, go forward. That's for chapter 321, right? Forget the past. Let's move forward. Don't stick on which one. A couple words for 21 is sir. It's about the spirit. Jason explained very well that part. Basically, for those people, I cannot find an exactly word for that's Asia tradition. We put like for anything ancestor past, we put on the from family to a country. We put use which kind of material you use. Expensive one is better. However, they have meaning. For example, he actually on a Jason tax, believe he used the pine or chassis. Pine, that's mean long stay. They hope their dynasty lasts forever. Chestnut, like a very Chinese word, 站立. Basically, you shaking, you get like a scared one. They have the other metaphorical meaning. So that's for 21. I'm going to explain another two which is comparable. When I'm going to not just stick on, it's just interpretation. When you're happy with the music, dance, get high, don't go overdone it. 悦而不淫. Another one is when something sad happened to you, hold on. Don't to take negative distress, or you lost your loved one, or lost your career. Keep move forward. Another one is 19. Another one about if general lesson about the minister and friends. If it's general, if about how about a leader and follower. Leader, you need give ritual, show respect to the follower. A follower needs show loyalty, faithful to the leaders. Use another way around. This is Chinese word always you see comparable. It's very, very interesting. Normally we say, "Oh, follow me." That's the kind of one statement. Because I'm correct, it's default by. You don't need synchronized side. In Chinese way, they use the comparable way to attacks and learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Very much appreciate that. Another thing that I took away is this important of not allowing our emotions to overtake us and dictate our behaviors as well, number 20. So and Suki.
Joe, I think Margarita might put the mark in the chat before me, so please let her to this.
Oh, forgive me. I did not see them. Oh, Margarita, forgive me. I apologize.
Hi, thank you. Actually, I just want to share about my experience in dealing with different translation. I'm Indonesian, and I read several translation which they translate verses quite differently, sometimes similar, sometimes not. So what I do usually, I respect each translation, and because they represent the ideas from the translator or the writer, just quite interesting actually. By today I search in Bahasa Melayu and Bahasa Indonesia, they translate that differently in different angle. So what I usually do in dealing with these differences, I just want to see what is the essence and how this text talks to me. So, and it's quite interesting. And I really love this verse 21. I think I agree with Amon that it's about not just using your knowledge to criticizing things, but also how to accept things that have been done and that is here and accept it as it is. Yeah, that's from me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Margarita. Great comments as always. Suki.
Yeah, for the 19, from the book I'm reading, Su Shi, one poet, has a very interesting comment for the 19 I want to share. He said, "Aren't these status and the salaries and the laws and the punishments? Why must a lord treat his ministers with ritual propriety? Those who come for the sake of status and the salaries are greedy people. When there's no more gain, they will disappear. Those who can be put to use by law and the punishment are afraid of power. In places where power cannot reach, they will set themselves loose. This is why none of them works better than ritual priority." I find this is very interesting. I think in Western thinking for organization, we use like incentive, motivation, laws of punishment. But in here it says actually using certain incentive is never a real drive, real sincere drive to work closely without fear, without other like a punishment, with a like a more codependent relationship in a organization. Also, that paragraph, fear, afraid of fear, that fear element, I think speak to the 21. I think the reason Confucius didn't want to comment on the history, which could be the real the plenty trees, or use that as a spirit play, it's a subtle criticism to use the fear as a strategy to govern. So Confucius just say, I don't want to comment on that. Otherwise, he will say, oh, they are very good. So that's the same strategy for Confucius to express his criticism, but never in a real, very conflict say that this is wrong. So that's I feel like that's my mirror to the how you govern people. And the 20, the poem actually has certain because it's a poem about how a man wanna courting a woman. So in the Chinese word has a sexual misconduct meaning that. So that's I like the one in my in the translation I read. There's a word I couldn't pronounce it. Licentious. Yeah. So I think that actually convey what the poem is about, and also I feel like it's quite open-minded. It's like Confucius is teaching us some like sexual topic, which is not something he tried to shy away from. So I feel this translation uses that word actually convey the Chinese meaning in that. Yeah. So that's something I want to share. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Suki, for that. All right, Jason Amon, do you have any comments or?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Suki. I think your Sudongpo's comment is very, how do you say, insightful, and that's very good. So I like it because it's 19, the Confucius said if the prince, okay, or I take out the if, the matter, the prince direct the minister with the, right, ritual. So there's another way to do it, right? Just the common said is reward and punishment, right? So instead of using reward and punishment, you should use ritual, use the, and that's the right way to do it. Then your minister will do their best to work for you. I think that's the conversation here. And then about 20, the point, and I try to make a translation on the that.
Is that me or is that?
Nope, that's Jason. You froze again. Sorry.
Here is I froze. So
Yeah, we lost you for a minute there.
About 10 seconds there.
Yeah.
Oh, 10 seconds. Okay. So the translation on that point is it said the guan guan goes the water guan guan go the water birds on the isle in the river. The fair lady, good suit for a junzi. Okay. So basically that's the that point at the first 4 lines say that. So basically talking about when the junzi, a prince or a gentleman, hear the birds usually singing, and then because usually they are mating, right? So the birds start to sing, they start to think about the fair lady, and that's the one I'm going to pursue. So that's the folk song I would consider, and the Confucius give a teaching how to read this kind of folk song.
Thank you, Jason. Amon.
Yeah, I figured now is as good a time to really delve into this idea of ritual a bit.
Yeah, sure.
Because we were just talking about this idea that you could lead with rewards and punishments, or you could lead by ritual. And as I had told a few of you earlier, I had a very busy weekend of birthdays and baby showers and celebrations, and I had to take my niece to go see the Minions movie, which was delightful. But they have a new refrain at the open of any movie you go to in any theater, and it's please silence your cell phones. Not silence your cell phones, or you will face the wrath of our security guards and their pepper spray or tase. It's not rewards and punishment, in other words. It's just you're reminded to do this. And ritualistically, it's funny. At one point in the movie, somebody's cell phone rang, of course, and my niece just turned over her shoulder and kind of scowled at them like, How gauche, how rude, how inconceivably unthinking. And of course, when the movie was out and we were in broad daylight, the first thing in her hand and the first thing her eyes were on were her phone. And it made me think about the difference between habit and ritual. Habits are things we develop, and they can become very ritualistic. Especially if you've gotten into a habit of, I check my phone, after I brush my teeth in the morning, or I, make sure that I turn it off. These become habits that then become rituals, in the sense that it's important that I do this now. When you do it and it works for everyone, when you do it out of habit, but it's discordant with everyone else's harmony, and it actually deteriorates from your own quality of life, then it's not necessarily a ritual that is, I think, what Confucius was after when he talked about ritual. He's talking about those things like silencing your cell phone in the theater, or turning it off at the dinner table. And I'm very fixated on this phone because it's a newly developed cultural habit and rituals that we're all in the world developing around this new piece of technology. When is it acceptable? When is it not? When is it just okay to look at it on silent? When should you be giving your undivided attention? We don't have these set out. The Book of Odes doesn't tell us this. And I do think to some small measure, that's the discordance that, James, you were describing between chapters 20 and 21, or is it 19 and 20? 20 and 21, where in one moment he's respecting the wisdom of the ages, and in the next he's saying the past is the past. Now, look at what's in front of you now. And I hit on this because it felt very vignette to what would Confucius say or do now. He probably couldn't, conceive of adopting a cell phone into modern life, but saying that he could, would he have the definitive book written on cell phone etiquette and the proper rituals for interaction with something like this? So this is why I say I think ritual is a good word, not because it necessarily evokes religious connotation, but because it evokes both habitualness, but dedicated, serious habitualness, not necessarily habits formed by default behaviors.
I really like that. I mean, and we were discussing this prior, and this is, habits are something that you cultivate, and in a way, this is essentially how you can cultivate things like virtue. So a lot of these rituals that we use, in a way, are cultivating our behavior and how we interact with each other, and helping us, again, learn what is virtuous, what is appropriate under certain circumstances. And the cell phone example is brilliant, because how many times have we gone out and we've seen people at dinner and everybody's heads are buried in their cell phones, and you're starting to think yourself, wow, you really wish there were a kind of a ritualistic kind of dinner where, kind of where people would not necessarily, everybody wouldn't pull out their cell phones and people would actually appreciate each other's company. And that actually has a role, an important role to play in society. And it's the importance of manners, the importance of having manners and respect for one another, and how we actually interact with one another. So ritual has a very important role to play, as far as how we interact with one another. And I think that this is a really key point, because with book 3, Confucius is continually going over the importance of ritual, and to some degree, I was struggling with why he was actually, continuously, speaking about the importance. But so it was a fantastic example, Amon. I'll just say your students are very lucky to have you as a teacher. So because that made things very, very clear, both on
The ones who stay awake, maybe.
yeah. Well, yes. Okay. Well, the ones that do, they have a lot. They'll. I guarantee you that they're grateful. And yeah, especially the example of going over in 21 and helping us hash that one out. James, I see you unmuted. Would you like to comment? Or your, yeah, I think everybody's freezing tonight.
I guess not. No, I think I said enough.
Okay. Okay.
Just looking forward to the next round of translations. Thank you.
Okay, great. So with that, why don't we just get started on, I think we'll probably be able to finish 22 and 23. And then we can kind of, we may not get to 24, 25, and 26 tonight, but we can pick up on that next week. So would anybody like to read, James or Suki, would you like to read your translations for us, or anybody else for that matter? Dave, feel free if you want to read yours as well. James.
Yeah, I do have one. I just ran it through. I ran it through Google. I love Google because it's actually making sense out of some Chinese now. But maybe you can make some notes, Jason, and critique this. So here's the Google one first, and then I'll give you the James Legge. Then how does Guanzhang know the propriety? He said, Banjiang tree plugs the door. And the Guan family also closes the door. Bang Jun is a good friend of the two kings, and there are some people who oppose them. And the Guan family also opposes them. The Guan family knows propriety, but who doesn't? And now the James Legge. The master said, small indeed was the capacity of Guanzhang. Someone said, was Guanzhang parsimonious? Don't run to your dictionaries. I've got it. That means tight-fisted, economical. Parsimonious. Guan, was the reply, had the sangui, and his officers performed no double duties. How can he be considered parsimonious? Then, did Guanzhang know the rules of propriety? The master said, the princes of state have a screen intercepting the view at their gates. Guan had likewise a screen at his gate. The princes of states, on any friendly meeting between two of them, had a stand on which to place their inverted cups. Guan also had such a stand. If Guan knew the rules of propriety, who does not know them?
Thank
Number
you,
23. One more, right?
Oh yeah, 23. Yeah, you're correct. I'm sorry.
Yeah. The master instructed the grand music master of Lu and said, how to play music may not be known. At the commencement of the piece, he said, how to play music may be known. At the commencement of the piece, all the parts should sound together. As it proceeds, they should be in harmony, while severally distinct and flowing without a break. And thus, on to the conclusion. That's all.
Thank you, James.
I can share mine.
Perfect.
22. The master said, Guanzhong was a man of small capacity. Someone said, does this mean that Guanzhong was frugal? The master said, Mr. Guan had 3 residences, yet every officer on his staff had no separate duty other than the one he was assigned. How could this be considered frugal? In that case, did he understand the rights? Rulers of states put up gate screens in front of their palaces. Mr. Guan also put up a gate screen. Rulers of states, when entertaining other ruler, had an earthen stand to be used for wine cups after the guests had drained their cups. Mr. Guan also had such a stand. If Mr. Guan understood the rights, who does not understand the rights? 23. The master, speaking about the music with the grand musician Zhi of Lu, said, "This much can be known about music. It begins with vigorous playing, and when it goes into full swing, the sound is pure and harmonious. The notes are bright and distinct, and the passages fluent and continuous until the music reaches the end." Another version. The master said, "Small indeed was the vessel of Guanzhong." Someone said, "Do you mean that Guanzhong was frugal?" The master replied, "Guan got to keep 3 taxes, 3 gui, for himself, and he had each staff member for only 1 responsibility. How can he be considered frugal?" "Then do you mean Guanzhong understood the rituals?" The master said, "The lord of the state had a screen wall at his gates. Guan had likewise a screen wall at his gate. The lord of the state, in promoting good relations with another lord, had a stand on which to place drinking vessels after the toast. Guan also had such a stand. If Guan understood the rituals, who did not understand them?" 23. The master spoke to the grand music master of Lu, saying, "Music might be understood in this way. When it begins, it rises in unison. As it proceeds, it becomes pure and distinct, and it continues until it reaches its finale." Thank you.
Excellent, Suki. Thank you. Actually, would you mind putting that first translation in the chat? Then whoever did it. Just
You're
Or you
talking
could-
about, yeah,
The-
Suki's. Yeah.
Suki's, yeah.
Oh, first the full translation.
Yeah, just the name of the person that actually made.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So
And I apologize for the Google translation. I didn't think it was that good. I apologize for that.
oh no, that's quite all right. I think it's important to see how far machine learning has come along, or so it's good to know that Jason will still be employed for quite a long time. So,
Yeah, actually my kids,
Employed.
the
Yes.
thing my kids like to play is write English, then translate to the Google Translate to Chinese, and they have the Chinese translate to Spanish, and Spanish to English, and then they compare, how far it can go. So
thank you for that. So yeah, very much appreciated. And
and
thank
Google translation, it said like somebody called Bang Jun.
what was it called?
I think that I heard James translation from Google that somebody called Bang Jun blocked the tree, something like this.
History.
Never mind. I think it's total, that's goes to
Yeah, let's go to the real translation.
It's Guanzhong.
and they have another guy also.
Oh, Bangguin. Yeah, it's Bangjun. Bangjun.
Yeah, that's no.
Tree. It's a Bangjun tree.
Yeah, no.
Is there any tree in the Bangjun family? No. Okay.
Okay, let me explain this. That's funny. Okay, so basically you translate this one as Bang Jun tree. Okay, so this word is tree, but in Chinese, because the Google doesn't know ancient Chinese, this tree means it's a verb. It's not noun. So that means Bang Jun means the lord of the state. Okay, who plant tree. Okay, but actually it's not really plant a tree, plant a door, a screen door. So the Google translation will translate as Bangjun. Actually, it could be a person's name. That's true, because that sounds very, so in a way, Google translation is very smart. In modern day, I will not surprise to meet somebody, his name is Bangjun. That's a good name. Okay, I could name my grandson this name. That's wonderful name. Okay, so Bangjun Tree. Okay, so he planted or he set up a screen door. Okay, so I think that's why you got a very strange translation. Yeah. And actually, it's smart.
But actually, the translation was not a person. It was Bangjun Tree plugs the door.
Yeah,
so
Bangjun
like half,
Tree,
it's
yeah.
like half right.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Okay. So let's go to the correct one, so-called correct one. The master said. Okay. Before that, let me explain the person Guan Zhong. Okay. Guan Zhong is a person on the probably 200 years before. I'm not sure if I get the date right, but at least 100 years before Confucius' time. So a famous guy. So I assume all the people know who is Guan Zhong. Guan Zhong was a prime minister of Qi, the state of Qi, and he kind of had built the alliance. During that time, the emperor was weak. So he built the alliance, so make the state of Qi become the super leader, the de facto leader of the all the state. So in general, Confucius value Guan Zhong's contribution, because in the later chapter, I think book 14, he talked about Guan Zhong is great. Without Guan Zhong, we will be all barbarian. So that means without Guan Zhong, the foreigner will invade us and we will become barbarian. So that's Confucius praise him. But right now, somebody, Guan Zhong has a comment on that. So Guan Zhong, Confucius said, the master said, Guan Zhong is just a small vessel. Remember I think in book 2, as a tool or for
So
one purpose. Okay,
we lost you again, Jason. So it's right around book 2 you were about to refer to.
So can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so in the book 2, Confucius talk about Junzi is not a vessel, right? So what he meant is Junzi is not only served for single purpose. So here, Confucius even value Guan Zhong's contribution, but he still talked about Guan Zhong just a small vessel, because he only do one thing, the great contribution, which is defend China from the foreign invasion or something like this. So Guan Zhong is not qualified to being called as Junzi, according to Confucius. That's why he said Guan Zhong is just a small vessel. So somebody replied, you said he's a small vessel. Do you mean, okay, he is just economical, right? He saves money. Maybe he is just being economical. So kind of he tried to defend, right, for Guan Zhong. Then the master said, he had 3 residents with 3 sets of governmental staff. So he's talking about he has 3, because he's so busy. You can think about taking care of so many things. He's the prime minister and his state is the leader of all the state. So he must be very busy. So he has the 3 sets of office, depending on where he goes, and the 3 sets of redundant staff. So Confucius said he had 3 residencies with 3 sets of governmental staff. Is he economical? So then the person still tried to defend for Guan Zhong. So the person said, maybe he is following the ritual, the Li, right? So because according to ritual, we should have the three sets of the government. That's the rule. Okay, so he just followed the ritual. Then Confucius replied, his lord, okay, the Bangjun, his lord, set up a screen in the court. Okay, so that means that's according to ritual, right? For the lord, their office will set up a screen because you don't want people to see him directly. And he also built, and Guanzong also built a screen in his court. So he's mimic what his lord is doing. Then his lord has a platform to place inverted cup after toasting with foreign princes. So that's another ritual when you deal with foreign leaders, right? So you have to build the platform. After you toast, you put there. That's kind of luxury. So Guanzong also has one for inverted cup. If we call Guanzong knowledgeable of ritual, who does not know ritual? So Confucius' point is Guanzong doesn't know what's ritual. Yeah, so that's his criticize Guanzong. Even Guanzong has a great contribution in military, political. But he probably, in Confucius' point of view, he is not qualified being as a Junzi. Chapter 23. Okay, this one is Confucius' comment on, I will call it a philosophy of music. Okay, so the master taught. Okay, remember the words yu he used here. Remember when Confucius talked to his lord, he used reply. Okay, so Chinese words is ancient time is very important. The verb, when you use the verb to your inferior or to your superior, that's different. Okay, the same word, same verb, but it's different word. Okay, so instead of use reply, you will use yu, which means teaching or saying towards the person who lower than Confucius. So Confucius talk or teach or whatever to the chief of royal musician of Lu, because each state will have so-called the chief musician. Okay, so he talk about this. The pattern of music can be understood. Right? It commences with unison, then follow with purity, with readiness, with continuity toward the coda or finale or completion. So kind of like talking about that's the pattern, and then I don't know how well Confucius can play music, okay, but he probably know music very well. That's why he talked this one. And when I read this one, sounds like people talking about a symphony, usually have a full movement, blah, 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 this kind of thing. So that's the chapter 23. Yeah, thank you.
Very interesting. I found 23 to be very, very interesting. Amon, would you like to comment?
I will try and be brief, and then I am going to have to run for an evening.
Sure, absolutely.
Instead of taking these one by one, I want to address Confucius' concern or reiterations about the significance of music. I think it's twofold. One, I think it is that, sort of like Jason was saying, that a formal symphony is very ritualistic. And any music performance is done in a very specific way. You perform a piece of music in a given fashion, or it's disharmonious or discordant or just unpleasant to the ear. But there's also something of a person's character that shows through in their performance of music, which is why it's very easy to be taken in with somebody who has a authentic expression coming through their performance, as opposed to somebody who is sort of phoning it in or lip syncing it, as it were. So music is very revealing of character. And I think that's one of, and it is revealing of character through a ritual performance, which is one of the reasons I think Confucius found himself so concerned with it. The other reason, and I think this gets to the mnemonic device that is music, as a tool for learning, music is one of the most powerful ways for things to become ingrained in memory. I don't know what generation everyone is, but if I say I'd like to buy the world a Coke, most of us can still hear that harmony here 40 years later ringing in our skulls, because the incessantness of that music and the way it ingrains itself into your memory stays with people much longer than even their higher cognitive function. So I think Confucius had some concern with the misappropriation of music as a mnemonic to have people learn things they ought not to learn just because it was catchy or because it was resonant in a fashionable moment. And it's also why he reveres the Book of Rites, the Book of Odes, the Book of Songs. Those have the time-tested staying power, and it's the difference between a piece of modern pop music versus a piece of classical music. Not that one is empirically better than the other in our modern estimation, but I think Confucius would have no qualms about saying, no, this is good music and this is garbage. And it's good music because it's got that complexity. It's not trying to teach you a vapid lesson. Whereas, California Girls Are Undeniable is not teaching you anything of value that you will carry into your later life. I just picked that out of the blue.
I was about to just say, are you sure about that? Can you prove
it?
That?
Still rings in my head. So that's my take on Confucius and music. But again, these sort of complex lessons, ritual, character, benevolence, they're being reiterated again in a new fashion, in a new way, but the same lessons are being pipelined through these tiny little snippets when one knows how to dig for them, or one does the digging for them. And that's part of why this has stood the test of time. There's a lot of digging to do. I appreciate getting to spend the evening with you all. I look forward to seeing you next week. And Jason, I promise I will get some work done on book 4. I will see you all next week.
Thank you, Aman. As always, it's an honor to have you here, and have a great week. And we're looking forward to seeing you next week, and welcome back.
再见.
Take care.
I just wanted to mention that the California Girls by the Beach Boys is really a pay-in to the universality of feminine attraction. It discusses all the women from all the regions of the United States, and says that they want them to be California girls because these boys are wedded to the Pacific Ocean, so to speak.
But you were going in and out, and I'm assuming there were some very important things that we missed in that. I heard the main thing being.
Well, it probably didn't even matter, but the point is that they're basically that California is kind of a convent on the Pacific Ocean, and they wish that the girls from all the various regions of the United States could suddenly appear there and be in all the natural beauty of the West Coast.
I was about to say, so it's very
that's what the
Taoist.
intention of the song is.
It's very Taoist. It's a return to nature. So yeah, and I think that's actually the most important part of that song. So it's that's what the intent was. Of course, we'll never know. Or actually, maybe we will. Maybe it'll come out in a biography. and say they were actually just
It's
talking.
all written. Yeah, it's all written down. It's almost like the Beach Boys. It's almost like the Beatles or Christianity. It's all out there.
Right.
They were active with Manson. With one of the Beach Boys was very close with what was his name? Was it James Manson? The guy who was convicted of murder.
Oh, Charles Manson.
Charles Manson. Yeah, they were very close. Yeah.
Jeez. Well, with that, it's, you know, choose your friends wisely, I guess, is also a form of wisdom. So, so would anybody like to go ahead and comment on number 22 or 23? Feel free to type exclamation point in the chat. You know, I found this use of music actually to be very, very interesting. And I actually read a quote about it for at least number 23. It says, music serves as a model or a metaphor for the process of self-cultivation. In this particular, it was commenting on number 23. Starting in confusion, passing through many phases, and culminating in a state of wu-wei perfection. That was just one of the, I felt that was an interesting comment. Anybody wish to comment on number 22? I think Dave, actually, you typed exclamation point in the chat, so forgive me. You were a little bit early,
Yeah,
so.
I got a footnote here, and I apologize. I didn't follow Jason completely, but I think this is some additional information because it starts off, you know, Guanzhong was noted for frugality, wasn't he? And the master said he has his 3 returning mansions. And the footnote is various explanations of the name 3 returnings are given, one being that it housed Jin Guang's 3 wives. And I think in Jason's, he said 3 residences. In any event, Confucius disapproved of the way Guanzhong, an official of the state of Qi, imitated the ways of a ruler, because it says he was a official, he was not the ruler. And it seems to me, it's a little sarcasm here that he's built 3 residences for his wives. He's throwing these big parties, pretending like he's a ruler. And the first sentence that he's a man of small parts, I think we would use the expression he was a small man, because he was pretending to be something he wasn't. That anyway, I thought I just curious if Jason might think that might be a
So small and moral character, you're saying, in sense,
well, yeah, just as
or actually in his physical stature.
well, no, not physical, but pretending to be somebody important and wasting a lot of money and doing the parties and everything else, pretending like he was a Mr. Big. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I do see some translation talk about 3 wives. Okay.
Right.
So because the word they use 归, okay, it's returning. So it's vague. Okay. So it could be return to your home. Okay. So each home has a wife. Okay. It could be this way. I see some, but I don't think has 3 wives is wrong during that time. Okay. So so I think that better ways to have 3 residents. Okay, that's the way I interpret it. And then remember, during that time, probably not much different between your residence and your office. So your house staff probably also your office employee. So he has a 3 set. So I think that's what Confucius is talking about his situation. And second thing about the mimic your Lord. Same situation, right? In the Confucius time, the state of Lu, okay, when the Lord lost their power, the minister, the 3 prominent houses, they start to mimic what the Lord had to do. And the way you can say, well, I have to do that because I'm busy, right? My boss has no time to deal with a foreign leader. I have to do it for my boss. So I have to build this one, right? So in a way, it's not wrong. But Confucius said, no, that's not right, because you are still working for your boss. So you should not mimic what he's doing. That's not working according to the ritual. I think that's he's talking about. And number 3, talk about the small vessel. David talk about it could be a small man. Yes, I think it could be means a small man, but we probably should understand small man in a positive way than the negative way, because small man doesn't mean that you are a bad person, right? It just has become a tool. Like probably most of the modern people are all small men, because you work as an engineer, you work as a musician, you work as reporter, newspaper, writer, director, actor. You only work as a tool. So everybody probably a small man. Small man doesn't mean you are bad. So I think Confucius' feeling about Guanzhong could be mixed, because he cannot deny Guanzhong had a great contribution. But in a way, Guanzhong is not his standard of gentleman. That's why he has this kind of conversation. At least that's what I read from this paragraph.
And just think a side comment be, if you have 3 wives, maybe having three houses might be the best way to keep peace in the family.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I would imagine that it would be.
So that's why people ask, is that according to rituals? Okay.
Thank you. So next up, I have Suki, followed by Kevin.
Yeah, following the topic of Gui, I think in my translation, one of my translation is that it says the historical uses of Gui indicate that it refers to a special privilege granted by the Duke of Qi to Guan, that he was allowed to keep 3 commercial taxes, textile, grain, and the labor taxes collected from the marketplace for himself. So that's another angle, but also refer to the small and big. I will share another scholar's explanation. He said that a man of large capacity is someone who is able to hold his accomplishments without letting it overflow. Emperor Yao was such a man because his integrity was like that of heaven, and so he took heaven as the measure of his capacity. But Guanzhong was not like Yao. As his wealth became apparent, his excesses multiplied. By letting his 3 residents fill with officers and himself indulge in extravagance, so that he could show off his riches. I think the 三规, 3规, whatever it is, it's a sign of showing off. That's why showing Guanzhong was someone who could not contain his wealth, because his wealth is overflow. He cannot hold it. So it's all showing off outside to see, look at me, I have this and this. So that's why saying he's a small person. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that, Suki. That was an excellent explanation. Kevin.
Yes, thank you. I try to follow. If I want to talk about what's a virtue, what's a value, like Dave and yourself, Joe, you talk about what's the standard, like what you call the 君子, another called or small person.
Right.
In that time, that's the key. All that time, well, based that his standards talk about 2 elements. One is frugal or economic. If you got money, you still try to live a simple life. That's high value virtue for him, And here another one is use li. If you got, you can live a luxury life. Okay, what the president has, I can have too. That's currently practiced. Lots of rich people can doing that, right? So. The house, like White House. So we got 3 like that. That's a 3. Meaning, that mean you 3, wife of that's historical. Maybe that's less important, but more important is about how do you live, use your wealthy, use others. If you If you use your vowel C, C is competitive with the qi xiu, like Jason three original tags, small vessel, qi, and Suki is capacity. How we normally metaphorical in China about your stomach could be one vessel, one cup water. You can hold the whole ocean, which means you can accept anyone. They have different voice, different looking, different religion. You treat your enemy still like, can we get to be the friend? Accept the difference, tolerant to the intolerance. That's for my understanding. Those, if you still okay, I'm going to compete. You got one house, I got 3 houses. You got a 1 day vacation, I got 10. I go to travel the world. That's a modern days. The virtue is consumption based, virtue system is different at that time. If from a nature aspect, look at climate change, this could be that time if we come back. That's a return by the Gui. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Suki.
Yeah, just want to add a fun fact for the musician part. In ancient China at that time, these court musicians, a lot of them were blind because they could not see. Their mind could not be distracted from the sound. That's something I read from a book. So just something to think of.
That's very interesting. Very, very interesting. So by not having one of the senses, they developed another. Are there any other comments about number 22 or number 23? Margarita.
Hi.
Hi.
I just want to share, there is this news in Indonesia about a donation group. Actually it was developed using religious value. So even the cleric who ran this donation, the donor organization, they collect a lot of money, and they claim they do all the necessary spending according to the law of the religion. So they do it. They say they took 10% out of every donation that they have, and it is supported by the religion's value. However, people still kind of complain because they're supposed to be like for humanity, not for your gain. Even 10%, that it's about a lot of money. I think in USD, maybe more than $100,000. So it's really huge money. 10% out of it, even though it is the law, but it's too much. So I see this in this verse. So sometimes it is not enough just to follow the tradition. You need to reconsider whether that is the right way. It's not just enough to mimic the tradition, but whether this is appropriate. Yeah, this is just something that comes into my mind. Thank you.
It's a very important point. You have to make sure it's servicing the function that actually it's that it needs to in order for it to be actually effective and virtuous in and of itself. So I very much appreciate that example. Anybody else have any other comments for number 22 or number 23?
I don't know if it's relevant, but I think it's appropriate to Margarita's story about what happened in Indonesia. I watched a movie last night. It was possibly just a fantasy, but it was this idea of two gentlemen that started they were involved in drugs and pornography, and they started a business. And this reminds me of the religions of the 1990s. In the 1990s, at this time, they just discovered that everybody had credit cards, so that if you had a particular concern, religious concern, you could advertise that people would get religious benefits from calling and asking questions, or calling and requesting a token gift and then making a donation, and that this would be a good thing. This would be a holy act to do that. And so in the movie last night was the same idea, except that people were ordering pornography on the internet, and it was a story about the beginning of large scale pornography on the internet in the 1990s, which is when the internet started in the United States. So it was. But this was already in operation because people had these credit cards, and you could just simply request believers to call, and because of that call, receive a donation. Because the call was an acknowledgement of whatever religion that you were preaching. So that became the methodology of new religious TV evangelists. That became the methodologies of the TV evangelists in the United
Jimmy
States,
Swaggart
and
of the
probably
world.
other customers. Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, and that was actually ended up being quite scandalous, actually, if I remember correctly. Jimmy Swaggart, and then there was also another one, I believe that was
Taggart.
Yeah.
Was the last one.
Yeah.
He was number 3. Yeah.
So
And then there was the one that was married, the husband and wife, and
yes, Tammy
they got
Baker.
it too. There was Tammy Baker and her husband.
Tammy,
Yeah.
and I think it was James Baker, right? Or maybe that was the Secretary of State.
That's right. Jimmy Baker and Tammy.
Oh, it was Jimmy.
I'm not sure. No, I think it was Jimmy Baker.
Yeah, me too. I think it was as
Yeah.
well. So, well, any other comments? If not, I'm gonna just to make some quick announcements about upcoming events. First and foremost, I would actually like to announce what Jason, you have an event coming up on Saturday as usual. And would you like just to talk about that for a moment?
Yeah, this time we talk about the religious Tao, okay, because we all study Taoism, right? So, but today's people's understanding, a lot of them mix with the philosophical Tao and the religious Tao. So basically, I would like to kind of analyze, during the time of the 2nd or 3rd century or 4th century in China, the Taoism actually kind of go to different direction, so-called the Neo-Taoism. So one of the branch will go to the religious Tao, which you will see extremely popular in Taiwan or in Southeast Asia. So the Chinese community, basically, that's religious, which is not really belong to philosophy, but it's branch out from philosophy. So that's why I think that's worth for one meetup to explain it. So yeah.
Very much so. I'm very much looking forward to that, actually.
And again, our master among is the ordained Taoism priest. So
is he really?
Yeah. So
I didn't know that, actually.
So actually they are connected, but it's got a very mixed, it's like.
So he's required to actually be there on Saturday.
Yeah, so I don't know.
But no, that's actually very interesting. I'm gonna have to ask him about that next week. And so we have some exciting meetups as well. As we have tomorrow evening, CJ, who is the organizer for the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society, will be returning for Comprehensivist Wednesdays, and he'll be covering a chapter in the Design Way called "The Measurements of Life: Tools for Comprehensivity." This is basically how do we measure, interpret, and assess various situations in our lives. So I encourage you to attend that. That particular chapter was very interesting. And then on Thursday is Carl Jung's 7 Sermons to the Dead. We'll be covering sermons 2 and 3, and it's Abraxas. So it's an interesting piece if you haven't read it. So I would also encourage you to attend that as well. Shrikant has really lined up some Jungian experts, some excellent Jungian experts to come in and help articulate what Carl Jung was actually saying in those particular passages. And on Friday we have the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 16. We'll be continuing to go through, working our way through that text. So, and those are all the upcoming events. I think we actually have another one on, I believe, Sunday with Yasuhiko. Oh yes, it is Sunday. He'll be speaking about the new spirituality, and that's whenever Yasuhiko attends, it's always a lot of fun. So those are our upcoming meetups. I want to thank everybody for this evening, and everybody had some great comments. I thought this was an excellent session. I really enjoyed it. Bruce, nice to see you. Thank you for joining us. And I will see everyone next week, I hope. So everybody take care. Jason, anything?
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.